Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and we are back for another wonderful week in wacky South Africa. Today, I'm, of course, joined by Mr. Terence Corrigan. Terence, how are you doing this fine Monday morning, afternoon?
South Africa gets weird and weirder. Always something fun going on.
Always something fun going on indeed. And, of course, we also have Miss Sargon. Sarah, how are you doing this Monday afternoon?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all, thank you.
Excellent. Well, with that out of the way, and with the power of coffee coursing through my veins, let us first go on to some comments from our former president, Thabo Mbeki. Thabo Mbeki was speaking recently in public. He was talking to ANC delegates in the Free State over the weekend, and he said that the ANC is too important to South Africa, it's too big to fail, and that if the ANC collapsed today, South Africa would become ungovernable. Mbeki said, quote, "If the ANC collapsed today, ceased to exist, this country would become ungovernable simply because of the influence of the party. 3 provincial governments are ANC. The national government is ANC. The ANC owes it to the nation, to the country, to sort itself out." And he went on to say that the ANC has always been committed from its foundation to serve the people of SA, that that's all it needs to do. We must bring the ANC back to do that. He said it was up to party leaders and members to make sure the ANC lived on. "We can't allow it to die. In my view, we cannot renew the ANC if we cannot renew ourselves," said Mbeki, "as individual members and individual leaders. Our renewal should be based on respecting and upholding the constitution of the ANC." Terence, the former president has been coming back, I think, into the headlines a little bit more recently. During the Zuma years, he was relatively quiet, at least as far as I remember. What do you make of these comments of his and about the ANC's importance to the country as an organization?
If you are talking in terms of the influence the ANC wields, he's onto something. It's been the kind of the linchpin of South Africa's political system since the 1980s, because of the of the power it's wielded. But I think also buried within his comments are any number of sentiments that just prove how destructive it has become. Let us commit ourselves to the constitution of the ANC, party before country. You must understand that there is a particular strain of thinking that goes with liberation movements. This is true for the ANC. It's true for ZANU-PF, for the MPLA. The sense of historical inevitability that liberation movements are not only in power by virtue of of a popular vote. They are there by the mandate of history, and they possess, let's say, the keys to these things. And that is one reason why I don't see any. I think any kind of reform will ever come from within the ANC, because it is too invested in this idea that it is presiding over an inevitability. In Zimbabwe, we saw that even it could even effectively lose an election, and that didn't really matter. ZANU-PF was still the only historically legitimate government. So, in former President Mbeki's defense, I would say that he's not the only person to have said this. Richard Calland, I think, made a similar point. And around the world, strong political parties have been seen as stabilizing influences, the Congress Party in India being a case in point. In fact, it's been said the British left 2 great legacies in India. One was the Indian Civil Service, and one was the Congress Party. Ironically, one formed by the British, one formed to oppose the British. But it could at least, let's say, manage the society. The ANC, I don't think, has anything like the integrity or even the internal coherence anymore to perform that role. Perhaps in the 1990s, perhaps under Mbeki, It did. I mean, he was a centralizer, and he was also quite ruthless with his opponents. Although I think all that did was push them onto the margins for them to reemerge. What happens the day after? I'm not sure. As one of our viewers has made that question, has made that comment. I think though that what we are seeing is a gradual descent into precisely that sort of ungovernability, because the implausibility of the, let's say, the ANC broad church is just increasingly being laid bare. We've got a combination of bad policies and policy incoherence. So there's not enough. There's enough to sort of chase away wealth production and skills and whatever, but not enough to plan around them. I'm not sure. So I don't know how this plays out. But I think to say that the country becomes ungovernable and the ANC must recommit itself to being what it always was, etc., is delusional thinking. It is highly ideological. In the 1990s, there was a piece, I think it was actually written by Mbeki, I could be wrong there, where it said the ANC remains the most important moral voice on anything facing the country, on any issue facing the country. Well,
Sarah, your thoughts on the former president's sentiments about the ANC and its importance to the country?
It's got a sort of messianic quality, a bit like Zuma will do whatever he was going to do, or the ANC is going to rule until Jesus comes. And it all ties into what Terence was saying about that sort of inevitability of the liberation movement running the country. But the very few of them have shown they've been any good at it or been good for the countries that they've run. So nothing is too big to fail. And to an extent, I mean, I would say that I would say that the ANC has failed as such, but it's weakened. It's so corrupt and so it's sort of so it's on so much of the moral low ground, if there's such a thing, that that to even consider that, to even put forward the idea that the country can only be governed properly if the ANC gets its act together, is incredibly insulting to the voters of South Africa, and B is there's no, as things stand at the moment, the only thing that's inevitable is unless some serious Finucare goes on in elections, that the ANC has a very good chance of disappearing, and there's nothing about its reasons for disappearing that suggests the country would be any worse off or any more ungovernable for it. They have so emasculated every aspect of the state, every department, every function, that I think, I suppose he's probably saying, you have to get your act together so you can carry on, you can get back on the saddle, so to speak, and govern properly. But I think that idea of unity, that idea of the ANC being able to go back to what it supposedly was, and that was doubtful to start with, it's hubristic. It really just doesn't. There's no mystique about the ANC anymore. There's no sense of that the ANC is any good at what it purports to do. So I think he's Mbeki actually being Mbeki, particularly speaking to the Free State, which is one of the worst performing provinces and has Ace Magashule as their sort of totem.
Yes, it was his kingdom for a long time until it was no longer his. But I think the part of the problem with Mbeki's comments here is he sort of is still talking about the ANC as though it is one thing, and I think that the reality is while it's ideologically still quite sort of coherent and on the same page, internally it's got so many factional battles over patronage and things like that effectively in a lot of ways it is already split as an organization.
A A couple of years ago, I attended a very interesting talk at the University of Pretoria by a guy by the name of Henning Melber. He's a German Namibian journalist, and he was also involved with SWAPO. He was, as he liked to point out during his talk, I'm a card-bearing member of SWAPO. But he was at that stage, I think, heading the Dag Hammarskjöld Foundation. So it was a serious intellect. And he was asked by somebody, he was talking about liberation movements. He was asked by somebody, well, what is SWAPO's ideology? And he sort of looked at them and said, oh, just a point of clarification, they have none. He says SWAPO, no longer really believes in anything. What it is a collection of people who have state power. And this, he's saying, well, I belong to this organization. This is how it is. I'm not sure that his flight was back to Windhoek. I think it was back to Stockholm. He just wanted to go back there to chill out for a while. Although maybe it's not too bad in that respect. But there you go. I think there's a bit of a paradox with Mbeki. On the one hand, I think that he was the last, well, I'd say probably the only president that we've had who's really understood the need for governance. Now, it doesn't mean that he always did it perfectly or even well, but he kind of understood that, you have to move from point A to point B. Zuma was disinterested. And I don't think, and Ramaphosa, I think, has shown that his interest is in keeping the ANC together at all costs. And if that means using the country to do so, he's willing to. Mbeki was willing to do an element of that, but did kind of understand that you need a functioning system to provide the resources and whatever. But at the same time, as an exile, as a figure in exile, remember that a lot of his life was lived with the ANC steering, as his world. And I think psychologically that, in a sense, becomes, almost more real than reality. You simply can't conceptualize a world outside of this. In fact, his great lieutenant Esop Bahad, when they all got defenestrated, and in those 8 days in September or whatever it was, he said, game into the media, well, most of us are closer to the ANC than we are to our wives, and I take that serious. I take that literally. He came back to South Africa and apparently shook hands with his father, whom he hadn't seen in decades, and was like, "Hello, comrade." Now, yeah, and I don't make any moral point about that. I just say that there's a psychology that I think is very difficult for those of us who do not live in it to understand.
All right. Well, let's move on from this topic to a story about the South African State Security Agency, which, as far as I can tell, hasn't done much except spy on South Africans for the past couple of years. And there is a report in News 24 which suggests that the State Security Agency, the group that is described as capturing the organization during the Zuma years, setting up illegal front companies, running illegal counter-espionage company operations, and basically just abusing their position as state security, is effectively controlled by the same group now as it was during the Zuma years, a couple of years into the Ramaphosa presidency. So the story says here that there were a number of employees of the State Security Agency who were fired or suspended or sort of moved aside after the Zuma era ended. But once Minister Ayanda Dlodlo was put back into the position as Minister of State Security, immediately she reappointed all of these characters, and basically the organization is still running as it was. Sarah, your thoughts on this News 24 piece?
You know what's intriguing about the spokes is that each one of them, whether it's David Mashloba, whether it's Arthur Fraser, whatever, they are as bad as they've been made out to be, and probably as bad as they look. I mean, I suppose one shouldn't be too surprised that they spent 10 years turning it into a it's more than a patronage, 1.5 billion rands worth of sort of covert companies to feather their nest. It's not as if they were, taking over the state because they didn't think the management was good enough. No. This was the same reason that they defenestrated, to use your term, Transnet or ports or anything else. It was simply, we have access to easy money, and by all accounts, Arthur Fraser to the manor born, and he came in and he did his best. They got him out, but he's had the last laugh in that the short stint he had as, what was it, DG or whatever it was of prisons, correctional services. He got Zuma paroled, and look at the damage that caused or didn't cause, or we don't know. We don't have the full story behind. But theoretically,
Be careful of wanting to know too much. Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
No, this is where it gets to. I mean, the thing is that, I mean, essentially, what one can't really get a good sense of is that Zuma set this all up. He had the guys working for him. Is whether they did as good a job working for him as they did setting up their front companies to defraud the taxpayer of 1.5 billion rand. But the very fact that you have so many of these sorts of people, obviously the whistleblowers are a different category, but these sort of people responsible for or not caring about or having no interest in our secrets, but being in a position to keep them hidden from everyone when we should really know what the hell's going on, is this probably one of the creepiest parts about the Zuma era and the ability to take over the levers of the state. But of course, what's at the end of the day more worrying even than what they left the security services in, or safety, whatever they call themselves, is the fact that to be brought under control and to be repurposed again would require Cyril Ramaphosa to put in place a person who doesn't exist within the confines of the cabinet or the NEC in general. So I mean, I don't know if a country can do without its spies, but I'm not sure if doing without them isn't better than doing with them.
It's not clear to me that they have actually protected us from anything. I mean, I know that there have long been rumors that, for example, international terrorist organizations are happily training away and running operations in South Africa without really being stopped, which is exactly what the State Security Agency is for. But it's not really my area of expertise. So, Terence, it's quite interesting that this story is coming out on News 24, which I have in the past, and some of our colleagues on the show have criticized for being too close to the ANC, we thought, particularly to Ramaphosa's camp. This piece kind of leads one to the inevitable conclusion that, well, if nothing's changed at an institution that as important as the State Security Agency in the sort of 3 years that Ramaphosa has been president, this Ramaphoria stuff really is kind of well and truly dead. What do you make of that?
Well, look, on the point of News 24. Look, I mean, I take news for what it is, and I try to read widely, and I sometimes miss things. But yeah, look, I mean, shout out to News 24. It's one of the first places I go in the morning, and it's often interesting stuff there. I don't always agree with it.
Too.
And I've written articles, critiquing some of theirs, and the writers on exactly those points. Look, I think that Ramaphosa has been largely form and very little substance, and I think increasingly not much form either. What you were saying about our intelligence services. Government's own report on the July riots last year, massive intelligence failure. Or it was worse than that. There was enough information for everyone to know it was coming, but somehow there was intelligence failure because they weren't talking to each other and they didn't know which road it was going. No, I mean it was a, as my late brother would say, a dog and pony show. In fact, my brother would say something else beginning with cluster and ending with. So Yep, spies are very close to it. It's pretty good journalism is leaked. I agree with our friend Whiskey Jack Zeta about that. Journalists can be can be suborned, and I think because they're looking for scoops. Provenance is not always going to be the greatest motivator or the greatest consideration, and that's a problem. But I think it's a much deeper issue. No, as I say, I think that when a retrospective is written on Ramaphosa's rule, the thing that will come out, and I'm certainly happy to put this on record now. His priority has been to maintain the ANC's unity. I think everything else is secondary to that. I don't believe he doesn't care about economic growth or about the scale of corruption. The cost benefit analysis, though, what's the incentive? Do you actually go after some of these rascals and risk upsetting your colleagues, or do you sort of defer these things indefinitely because that's kind of the way that you'll be able to keep everyone on board? And I think that's essentially the path that he's chosen. I don't think history will judge him well for it, but I think. But there's been a lot said in the comments about analysis, and I think, and that would be my analysis of his presidency.
Yeah. Right. It's rare that a politician who's more popular than his party acts as though they have no political capital.
Look, if we could just tie this back to the original point, I think that Ramaphosa was possibly, and I think I do say this with many qualifications, he was possibly in a situation where he could have taken part of the ANC. Let's say the sort of less dreadful parts, people who could at least see the consequences of the damage, and appealed over the head, taken them and appealed over the heads to the rest of the country, to some sort of new coalition, which I think inevitably would have meant that the ANC would have been split or splintered or shattered or whatever word you choose to use. I think that was a window that was sort of open to him for a while. I think it's pretty much closed now, and I think that I do feel a lot of the commentariat was so desperate for something that was not Zuma, for some semblance of positivity. And once again, I don't speak with any judgment on this, that they were willing to take almost any scrap of evidence to confirm that. I actually made that point on the 100 days into Ramaphosa's presidency. I was on a radio show with Mavuso Msimang, very, very a wise man. And, well, what has Ramaphosa accomplished in the first 100 days? And I said, look, you don't turn an oil tanker around in 5 minutes. You don't turn a government around in 100 days. And I think that we are so desperate for that turnaround that we'll seize on anything. Be very, very careful.
All right, well, let's move on to things happening overseas. And I believe that last night, the world got a new social media platform. This one, I believe, is called Truth, and it is being launched by Trump Media and Technology Group, which is, of course, the long-awaited social media platform that is going to be basically former US President Donald Trump's great flagship project. He's been kind of hinting at this for a while. It's been talked about for a while, but it looks like it's going to be coming out and launched now. This will bring Trump back onto social media, as he was banned from pretty much all of the big platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Google's various platforms as well. The company is actually led by former Republican U.S. Representative Devin Nunes, who I think was also a House committee chairperson at some point, and quite a strong supporter of Trump. So I guess the real question is, how well is this platform going to do? Is it going to be anything to rival something like Twitter? We've seen a couple of different competitors to something like Twitter appear for a while now, things like Parler which, despite some movement to those platforms, have not really managed to take off. It's very competitive business, social media. Sarah, is Trump's platform in 2 years from now going to be MySpace or TikTok?
Well, I think the problem is, and I don't. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I can't speak. I don't understand enough about the man, but my sense is that, in taking about a year to get this platform together, certainly he's going to have people going onto it. I mean, apparently it's virtually, people can't download the app because there's so much demand, and it's kind of got stuck in the sort of in everything's got stuck in the out tray. But I wonder whether, what we've had a year and a bit of Biden, and while Biden had, I think, a fairly disastrous presidency, I wonder whether ironically having the space of a platform like this to say your every wish and your thought, and get support into however you think, his weaknesses might actually not become more apparent, and there may be people who would have supported him a year ago, but there might have been enough space and time for whatever may be coming out not to be as appealing as it might have been, and I think that's largely down to the man himself. But I'm speculating. I am purely speculating. He certainly will get millions of supporters because he's of that sort of serious support base, that unquestioning support base that he had.
The ever-Trumpers.
But as I say, I think there's a point if these things don't happen quickly enough, particularly, I look again. Our colleague Herman Pretorius will probably give a better analysis of the likely success of any possible candidates. But there's been a lot more pandemic. There's been changes in how the pandemic's been managed. The economics have changed, and then there's Afghanistan, and you've got a couple of younger guys, and I think that's not unimportant, who coming to the fore, who might be a more attractive option than what's Trump now, about 78, 70, 76, 77, 78, somewhere around there. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just, it's wishful thinking on my part that,
so
come 24, he grabbed it like Parler.
I've watched, I watch tech products get launched all the time. It's kind of a thing I'm sort of interested in. And I think that, it remains to be seen, but that one of the problems here could end up being that this is just Twitter, but right wing. And that is the death sentence for any kind of product like this. It has to actually innovate. Otherwise, at the end of the day, it's only going to be a platform for people who are already kind of into that stuff already. And so I think that it'll have limited impact. I don't know. I could be very wrong on that. Terence, what do you think about this?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I think Twitter is the graveyard of sensible discussion.
Well, that's true.
So if this becomes the right wing Twitter, well, it's just the right wing graveyard of sensible discussion. The other thing is, I can't help remembering something that I was told in my young and misspent youth. Those who talk about sex all the time generally aren't doing it. Now, when I see Trump using the word truth in his title, there's something that just for some reason makes me think of that comment. Look, I have a serious concern about the way this sort of instant reaction type technology deals with, makes or hinders conversations, and particularly if it's kind of echo chambery. Now, in a way, Trump has shown a certain degree of innovation. Well, if I can't be on their Twitter, I'm going to create my own. There's a certain grit that I admire, but I don't think that this is conducive to actually exchanging views. But then again, I think this is a bit like trying to discuss philosophy with smoke signals. Twitter's just not just not good for that. That's why you have the meme warfare, and there's entire I'm familiar with Facebook because I'm old. Okay, yes, I'm old. I said it. There's entire Facebook pages that think they're really like pushing a progressive agenda because they produce meme after meme after meme, and it's like, seriously, you have a meme of an image of D-Day with some snarky comment, and you think that makes you part of the King's Royal Shropshire Infantry, facing off the Waffen SS Viking. No, the Viking.
No, it doesn't.
No, but I mean, but you see, this is it. Oh my, I owned him. We have real problems here, y'all. And it would be a lot more sensible if we were actually able to kind of discuss them. This is what I think, this is what you think, well, this is why I disagree with you, as opposed to burned. And I can't help thinking that between Twitter Original and Twitter Truth, or whatever it's going to be called, we just end up worse than we are now. Share your views, by the way, about the deficiencies of the current U.S. administration.
Well, I do think that the rise of Substack, though, does give some hope, which is of course a platform now that all the sort of journalistic types, at least overseas, are using to write often quite interesting pieces. But anyway, we are out of time, so we can't get into that. But
good old days of blogs, I like it. Yes.
Yeah, no, bring back a sort of healthy blogging culture.
When you had to write 800 words to sound ridiculous, as opposed to just
it's better. It's more texture to your ridiculousness.
Exactly.
Than a tweet. Exactly. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you tomorrow on the Daily Friend Show. Please check out thedailyfriend.co.za. Cheers, everyone.